3 months after she first noticed something was wrong, Emma stood in the middle of her own bedroom at 2 in the morning, holding a small plastic device up toward her headboard, waiting for it to beep. She'd read a comment on a forum post that made her stomach drop the second she saw it. "Have you checked for hidden cameras?" She'd almost laughed it off. That felt like something out of a movie, not something that happened to a normal 19-year-old girl in her mom's house. But she bought the detector anyway. She waited until the house was empty. She swept it slowly across her dresser, her nightstand, the shelf above her bed. And then it beeped. I found 3, 1 above her bed, 1 facing it, 1 tucked into her dresser, angled at her mirror. This is the story of what led up to that moment, and what her family found once they finally looked. Emma had always had a good relationship with her mom, Diane. It had mostly been the 2 of them for years, ever since her parents split up when she was young. Her dad lived a few hours away. They were close, but distance kept him from being part of the day-to-day. When Emma was 17, her mom started dating a man named Craig. He seemed fine at first. Polite, a little quiet, the kind of guy who didn't say much at dinner but wasn't unpleasant either. Emma didn't think much of him one way or another. He was her mom's boyfriend, not her problem to have an opinion about. They dated for about a year before he moved in, and that's when Emma says something shifted. Subtly at first, so subtly she second-guessed herself for months. She was 19 now, a freshman out of high school, working part-time while she juggled classes, still living at home because moving out wasn't realistic yet. Not with tuition, not with the cost of rent where she lived, not on a part-time paycheck. She had a boyfriend, Jake, also 19, also just starting to find his footing in the world. Normal stuff, a normal life, or it should have been. Because somewhere in the year after Craig moved in, normal started to erode in small, disorienting pieces. The kind of pieces that are easy to dismiss one at a time, and much harder to ignore once you line them all up. It started with a bag. Emma had gone shopping at Victoria's Secret and brought the bags up to her room before heading right back out to see a friend. Nothing unusual. She wasn't home more than a few minutes. When she got back later that night, Craig was waiting with a comment. "Why would you buy such expensive underwear when you could just get a pack at Walmart or something?" Emma froze. She hadn't shown him the bag. She hadn't even been home long enough for him to casually notice it in passing. Then he added something that made it so much worse. "I mean, blue? Really?" The exact color of what she'd bought. She stood there doing the math in her head, and none of it added up to anything good. He hadn't just glanced at a bag on his way past her door. He'd gone into her room. He'd gone through it. There was no version of "I happened to see it" that explained him knowing the color. She told her mom. Diane's response was gentle, almost reflexive. "He's just being overprotective." Emma let it go. What else was she supposed to do with a sentence like that? But it didn't stop there. Every time she left the house to see Jake, Craig had something to say. "Off to see that little boyfriend of yours again?" He never used Jake's name, not once in over a year. It was always, "That little boyfriend," said with a little curl of a smirk, like the name itself was beneath acknowledging. Sometimes it was worse. "Don't get pregnant, or I'll kick you out." He always laughed right after, like it was a joke between friends. But Emma noticed he only ever said things like that when her mom wasn't in earshot. And a joke you only tell when no one else can hear, it doesn't really feel like a joke. She started keeping a mental list. Not because she wanted to build a case against him. She just wanted to understand her own house again. Why did it feel like walking on eggshells to buy underwear? Why did leaving to see her own boyfriend require an audience with commentary? Why every small, ordinary thing about being a 19-year-old girl seemed to be something Craig had opinions about. Strong ones, delivered with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. The night everything came into sharper focus started like any other date night. Craig and Diane were heading out for the evening, and Emma asked her mom if Jake could come over. It was a normal ask. Diane had never said no before. She didn't say no this time either, but Craig overheard. And before they left, he turned to Emma with something harder in his voice than she'd heard from him before. "We both know why you want him over." Diane brushed it off, told him to knock it off, told Emma to have a good night, and they left. Jake came over. They were in Emma's room, just watching TV, the kind of low-key evening that had happened 100 times before without incident. At some point, the way it happens when you're 19 and dating someone you care about, it turned into kissing. He was leaning over her. That's when the door flew open. No knock, no warning. Just Craig, standing in the doorway, already yelling. Home early, and somehow already furious before he'd even fully processed what he was looking at. Emma and Jake hadn't even heard the car pull in. She'll admit it. In that specific frozen second, it probably did look bad. But the anger that followed wasn't really about a moment that looked bad. It was about something else entirely. Something Emma couldn't name yet, but could feel underneath every word Craig said next. He told her she couldn't have sex in his house. It wasn't his house. It was her mother's. He'd lived there for a little over a year. Diane managed to calm him down enough to get everyone through the rest of the night, but Craig wasn't done. For hours afterward, he kept opening Emma's door without knocking, checking, like he was trying to catch them doing something. Anything that would justify the anger he'd already decided to feel before he even walked in. Eventually, Jake just went home. It felt easier than staying. Emma lay awake that night, turning it over. She paid part of the rent. She was an adult. Even if she hadn't been paying anything at all, was it normal for a stepfather to care this much about who she kissed, and when, and where? To burst in over a closed door? To spend an entire evening trying to catch her in the act of something that was, at most, none of his business? She didn't have an answer. She just had a feeling she couldn't shake. Moving out felt like the obvious solution. It also felt completely out of reach. Part-time hours, full-time school, a cost of living that made independence a math problem she couldn't solve yet. She felt stuck in a house that no longer felt fully like home, so she did what a lot of people do when they don't know what else to do. She posted her story online and asked for advice. The responses came fast, and they weren't unanimous. One commenter zeroed in on the pattern immediately. The going through her things, the comments about her body and her relationship, the barging in without knocking, and called it what they saw it as, not overprotectiveness, but control. They pointed out that overprotective parents don't usually know the color of your underwear. Another commenter focused on Diane, gently pushing back on the "he's just overprotective" excuse. They argued that a mother brushing off her daughter's discomfort, even with good intentions, was its own kind of problem, one that needed addressing separately from Craig's behavior. A more skeptical voice pushed the other direction, arguing that Emma might be reading too much into normal step-parent awkwardness, that new blended families take time to find their footing, and that not every uncomfortable comment is a red flag. Someone else zeroed in on something no one had mentioned yet, the specificity of Craig knowing the exact color of the underwear. They asked, almost offhandedly, whether Emma had ever checked her room for hidden cameras. At the time, it read like an overreaction, a little dramatic, even to Emma. And then there was a commenter who spoke from experience, someone who'd lived through a similar dynamic with a parent's partner, who told Emma plainly that the joking threats, the fixation on her dating life, and the refusal to respect a closed door were not things to wait out. They told her to trust the discomfort she was already feeling, because it was probably right. Emma read through all of it more than once. Some of it stung. Some of it validated something she'd been too afraid to say directly. None of it, at that point, prepared her for what she'd actually find. In a follow-up, Emma clarified a few things people had asked about. Her biological father was very much in her life, and their relationship was good. But he lived too far away for her to move in with him, and she'd never told him the full extent of what was happening at home. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she knew exactly how he'd react. He had a history of losing his temper when people he loved were hurt, enough that it had gotten him in serious trouble in the past. He'd done the work since then, gone to therapy, changed. She didn't want to be the reason all of that unraveled. As for Jake, no. Moving in with him permanently wasn't an option either. He had a roommate of his own, and he was 19 too, just as much in the starting out phase of life as she was. He wasn't a burden on her. He was just as stuck as she was, in his own way. and moving out on her own. She wished it were as simple as people made it sound. Part-time hours, full-time school, tuition, rent. It wasn't a matter of willpower. It was math that didn't work yet. She'd read every comment. Most stuck with her, but one kept replaying louder than the rest. The offhand mention of hidden cameras. It scared her enough that she ordered a camera detector that same night. The detector arrived a few days later, timed, by pure luck, to arrive while Craig was at work. She waited until the house was empty to try it. She started in her own room, telling herself she was being paranoid, that this was probably nothing, that she'd feel silly in about 30 seconds. She didn't feel silly. She found 3, one above her bed, one facing directly toward it, one angled into her dresser mirror, positioned in a way that made her stomach turn the second she understood what it was actually capturing. And this is the moment. This is the moment the story turns. She doesn't fully remember the next few minutes. She remembers throwing up. She remembers her mom running in because she heard her, asking what was wrong, and Emma not being able to get words out at first. When she finally could, she told her everything. Every uncomfortable comment, every time he'd gone through her things. The bag, the door, the night with Jake. All of it, in a flood, months of small moments that had never quite added up to a full picture. Until now, when the picture assembled itself in about 90 seconds, she showed her mom the cameras. Diane's face changed in a way Emma had never seen before. She started crying, asking over and over, "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you tell me?" And for one terrible second, Emma felt like this was somehow her fault, like she should have pushed harder, said more, insisted sooner. But her mom wasn't asking to blame her. She was asking because she was breaking. "I failed you," Diane said it more than once. They sat together and had the conversation they probably should have had months earlier. The real one, without "he's just overprotective" standing in the way of it. Diane admitted she'd chalked the tension up to a new blended family finding its footing. She hadn't wanted to believe it was anything more than that. She believed it now. Emma couldn't bring herself to search the rest of the house. Diane did it for her. She found a 4th camera in the bathroom. Then she went to Craig's office. The one room in the house he'd always kept off limits, telling them it was for his work and he didn't want anyone messing it up. Emma waited outside the door while her mom searched it alone. She didn't think she could handle whatever was in there. Inside the drawers, Diane found things that had gone missing from Emma's room over time without her ever noticing. Pairs of underwear, hair ties, small personal items she'd assumed she'd simply lost or misplaced. And an old phone. One neither of them recognized. On it were photos and videos pulled from Emma's own social media, along with footage recorded inside her room. Some of her sleeping, some of her getting dressed, and some of private moments with Jake. Emma didn't watch any of it. She didn't need to, and her mother wouldn't have let her if she'd tried. What mattered to her, what still matters, telling this story now, isn't the content of what he recorded. It's that a room she believed was hers alone, the one place in that house that was supposed to be safe, had been turned into something to be watched. She called Jake. He came and got her immediately. She couldn't stay in that house one more minute, and she didn't have to explain why. While he held her in the car, her mom called the police. Emma cried in Jake's arms until she eventually fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. When she woke up, she called her mom for the details she'd missed. Craig had come home to police already waiting for him. According to Diane, he didn't try to deny the cameras. He admitted to placing them, and his justification was almost worse than the act itself. "I need to know everything going on in my house, not their house, not Diane's house, his." As for the stolen items and the old phone full of private footage, he claimed he had no idea how any of it got there. He was arrested that day. Emma told her biological father everything. He was already driving down before the conversation ended. She hadn't been asked to give a formal statement yet. She didn't fully understand how that process worked, and honestly, even thinking about it made her chest tighten. But for the first time in months, she wasn't carrying it alone. Looking back, Emma realized there had been far more warning signs than the ones she'd originally posted. small enough on their own to explain away, but impossible to ignore once she lined them all up. He'd always needed to know exactly where she was and who she was with, and hearing it secondhand from her mom was never enough. He wanted to hear it from her mouth directly, every time. He'd open her packages if she didn't get to them fast enough, with no explanation for why that was his business. He constantly commented on her clothing, telling her she looked inappropriate in anything even slightly fitted or short, language that had nothing to do with a stepfather's role and everything to do with control. He asked invasive questions about her and Jake's sex life and birth control at random, unprompted moments in a tone that had no business belonging to a parent. When conflicts came up, he positioned himself as the victim to Diane again and again until Diane had to start telling him outright to leave her out of it. He'd sigh or groan audibly when Emma walked into a room, exaggerated just enough that he could call it a joke if anyone pushed back, though nobody who witnessed it believed that. He interrogated her about anything she bought every time she came home with bags, though the Victoria's Secret bag remains the only instance where she has direct proof he went through her belongings. He refused to use Jake's name, ever, for over a year. Always that little boyfriend, always delivered with contempt. He repeatedly pushed her to call him Dad, a title he'd never come close to earning. And he never, not once, knocked before opening her bedroom door, not even after she'd asked him to, more than once. None of these, on their own, screamed danger. Together, they told a story Emma wishes she'd read sooner. If there's one thing Emma wants people to take from this, it's that the small, dismissible moments are rarely actually small. The comment about the underwear, the joke about pregnancy, the refusal to knock. Each one felt survivable in isolation, easy to excuse, easy to be told you were overreacting about. It was only once she saw all of it lined up, and then confirmed by something as undeniable as a hidden camera, that she understood how long the pattern had actually been building. Her mother believed her the second the evidence was impossible to argue with. But Emma still wonders, sometimes, what would have happened if she'd never seen that one offhand comment about checking for cameras? How much longer it might have gone unnoticed? How much longer she would have talked herself out of her own instincts? So here's the question this story leaves behind. If something about a person in your home has felt off for a while, even in ways you can't fully explain, even in ways other people brush off as nothing, what would it take for you to trust that feeling instead of talking yourself out of it?